Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, back with another personal vlog here, and on the heels of talking about travel memories from my last personal vlog. Here we are up to number 44, and this one I'm a sucker for old heritage hotels here. And I got a few hotels that I remember I stayed at over the years that I've definitely fallen in love with. Old historic heritage hotels, buildings that have been revitalized, or buildings that are significant to the community there. And there's a few particular properties that stand out on my mind here, and there's even a few rustic hotels that I'll share here. But I think the first one that stands out to me is, I remember back in 2010, and this place is still here, is I stayed at their Deer Lodge at Lake Louise there, which is practically right next door to the world famous Fairmount Chateau, and you're not that much farther of a walk from leaving the hotel to go to the viewpoint to see Lake Louise and the famous view with the Victoria Glacier there. But I mean, you can call this it's an old historic hotel, but it's very rustic there, where it's so rustic that there is Wi-Fi, but there isn't even a TV in the room. But it's definitely part of the old historic charm here, with the old plumbing there. Old plumbing to the point that the sink actually has a hot and a cold separately, where you have to turn both knobs and try to hope the temperature's right and wash your hands in the middle there. But I definitely love the Deer Lodge. It was an old wooden hotel with some charm, especially in the Flores Creek. Like, again, there's old wood buildings, and just the architecture, and in the dining hall there, the big vaulted ceilings there. I think that was part of the reason that I fell in love with the first townhouse that when I moved into Pine Ridge, a neighborhood in Calgary that I moved out since 2015, and been in this apartment for over 4 years. But that townhouse that I first moved into when I moved in my first own place, it was the vaulted ceilings and the wooden ceilings that when I was in the upstairs area, there's a bi-level. To me, it felt like that I was in a Rocky Mountain Lodge or Rocky Mountain Resort, and I made sure I told my realtor that to put that part in when it was time to put the place on the market, and hopefully the person that bought it off of me is enjoying the place. And it's been 4 years, and that's all part of my history there. But I'm going to say that's the first historic hotel that I stayed in that I would definitely stay in again. And if I ever decide to do another weekend trip to Lake Louise, but like everything else, everything gets more expensive there, and I know the next time I would stay there, it would be do both tea house hikes, because I did the Lake Angs tea house hike towards the end of the season there, and I remember it was unseasonably warm for Thanksgiving weekend there, because I was doing a little bit of fall foliage watching too, and enjoy a cup of tea. Just keep in mind, if you're doing those hikes there, it's so out of the way that it's only cash only, and they helicopter in all supplies there, so it's hit or miss what they have in stock when you get there. So that's just my little traveler's tip there, if you're watching along and thinking, that sounds like a good idea. So that's just my personal series. I did that back in 2010, so it's almost been 10 years, and things might have changed since then. But that's my first hotel. The second heritage hotel that I stayed in, you might be a little scared of the location, but it's not that bad if you live in a big city. It might be intimidating if, let's say, if you live in small town Saskatchewan and used to the rural living. That's just an example I'm throwing out there. But I think if you live there and then suddenly go to any big city, it'd be kind of intimidating. All big cities, no matter how great or livable they're in, all get accustomed to big city problems with crime and street people, but I actually stayed at this hotel on 2 different occasions, and I actually love the historic charm. I mean, it has a brewery inside. I never tried it, but I've gotten more into it over the years. Is actually the Patricia Inn in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver. The reason why I say the location might make you feel nervous is, yes, it's on East Hastings, and yes, there is pretty close to where all the street people are. And yes, it's pretty close to I think the one famous property that is there, and I think it's low-income housing, but I think it has struck various violations. I think it's the Balmoral. I'm not positive here. I mean, if you're from Vancouver, but yeah, I stayed at the Patricia Inn actually on 2 occasions. First occasion that I went there was actually for the 102nd Grey Cup, and well, to me, I came what I want there. The Stampeders. It was actually my first Grey Cup that I went on the road out of town for, and it was also the first one that the Calgary Stampeders were in it, and we won it. So that definitely made that, experience complete there. But getting back to the hotel here, I remember the first room I stayed in was a basic room. Actually, I think both times I stayed in this hotel, it was on the 3rd floor. And the first time I stayed there, I mean, it was the Grey Cup, Vancouver, downtown, and, you try to save some money. Because I did stay, first time I actually went to Vancouver on my own. I mean, the very, very first time I went to Vancouver, it was for Expo 86 when I was 4 years old with my family, and it's a different ball of wax when you're driving there yourself, but I remember I stayed at the Plaza downtown, where I was downtown. It was closer to right in downtown, and I think it was right near Comox Street it was called, and Burrard Street, I think, if I remember. But it was not far from the park, but I was there for the game then, because I actually went to catch the Stampeders on the road back in 2013, but it was like a half an hour walk to the stadium. However, at the Patricia Inn, yeah, you're a little further away from the park there, but I felt much closer to downtown, including BC Place and all the festivities there. And the thing is, you're, a 10, 15 minute walk, not only from BC Place in the game or Rogers Place if you were there for the, or Rogers Arena, get Place and Arena mixed up. But let's say if you were there to catch a Canucks game, it's right there where the stadium is, and also, you're about the same walk in a different direction to go to Waterfront Station, where the famous Canada Place is, and that's where the mall is, and the line for the SkyTrain that takes to the airport. But yeah, I mean, this Patricia Hotel, they had a brewery inside. It's called Pat's Pub. They have, entertainment. Nightly entertainment, and, I mean, I didn't have any of their beer there, but I've got more into trying craft beer as time goes on here. But, I mean, the first time I stayed there, I mean, yeah, there's some street people there, but my traveler's tip for that is avoid it by walking on Pender Street. And then you walk through I understand the second biggest Chinatown North America, only behind San Francisco there. And I mean, it's Hastings and Maine, that's definitely where a lot of what they call Skid Row is. But I mean, unfortunately, you do see a lot of the street people are in the luck. But I mean, it's a complicated story there. But I mean, that was the first time I stayed there, and then second time I stayed there was a couple years later. I followed the Calgary Stampeders to Vancouver, and this time I drove to Vancouver and parked there. I mean, one thing it's probably impossible to find in Vancouver is a hotel that provides free parking. I think that's impossible, but basically Vancouver is the kind of city that basically you just drive there, and then you don't drive again until it's time to check out, because that was exactly what I did when I drove to Vancouver in 2013, and it was definitely a nightmare to get to that hotel because it was Friday afternoon rush hour, and then when I went to Vancouver for the 102nd Grey Cup, I flew in, so it was basically photo transit. And the only days that for the 102nd Grey Cup that I took transit was the day I flew into Vancouver to get to downtown. Then the next day I did some sightseeing where I went to the Capilano Suspension Bridge and saw P&E grounds. So I did destinations that I had to take the bus. And then the third day was when I checked out to go to Vancouver to go home at the airport. So as I said, the second time I stayed. As I get back to the room comparisons, next time I stayed in the third floor again. But the basic room, I remember, it just had a stand-in shower. And it was like all tiley and looked like kind of like a shower that you'd see at a public, rec center, swimming pool. And the sink was actually outside. I mean, that could come in handy, let's say, if you were staying with someone and one could shower and do their business and the other can shave and brush their teeth, which that could be the thinking there. But this second time I stayed there, I had a deluxe room. And the room was a little bigger. I mean, I think the smallest beds that I sleep in is a queen. I sleep in a queen now in my personal. I used to sleep in a double before I moved. And there's times I sleep in a king bed because it's not... I try to get a queen, one bed, if possible, but unfortunately, if there's a cheaper room with two beds and they have a king, it definitely feels a little big. I'm like, wow, that's a huge bed. But, you're traveling, you try to save money here, but this bathroom had its own room, the entire bathroom and the Patricia in there, and it was those old-fashioned bathtubs where it had a ring around the bathroom, or the bathtub, where you close the shower curtains, and it had those legs, those kind of pig legs. I don't know what you call them in these old-style bathtubs, but it wasn't in a foundation. It was just a tub standing on pig legs, and so yeah. And then that was just definitely a neat historic charm there. But then you walk around these old hotels, and I just get amused by the architecture, the old. You get the old brick building on the outside, and it's usually about 4 or 5 stories, and then inside, sometimes you get the antique furniture and just, the drywall ceilings, the way it's designed, the hallways, and, you get most hotels have key cards, but sometimes you get the charm where you get an actual key, which was the case in the Patricia in there. The one drawback, I would say, with all historic hotels is the elevators are pretty slow because they still have technology from almost 100 years ago in there, and it definitely becomes annoying. Let's say if you bring in, let's say if a whole bus tour or train tour comes and you have one chauffeur guy that takes care of the bags, and all he does is load the bags in the hotel to bring it up to that floor and then repeat. But that's the only one drawback. Try to take the stairs unless if you don't have bags with you, and if they don't lock it up, because that has happened in some hotels there. But I'm going to say, other than location, which my driver's tip is walk down Pender Street, and you'd be fine to stay away from the street people. But if you live in the big city, you're kind of accustomed to being harassed by street people anyway. So yeah, that's my story on the Patricia Hotel in Vancouver and East Hastings there. The next historic hotel I loved that I've only stayed in it once. The story was intriguing, but I definitely would love to stay in it again, is when I went another football road trip, but this time I went to catch the Calgary Stampeders in Winnipeg there, and it's a different story, but I'm not going to drive from Calgary to Winnipeg in one day, which I did then, but I did on the way back. I broke it up. I actually drove up from Gimli just to see where the Crown Rail plant is there, but I guess next time I'll have to stay in Gimli just to see the Iceland heritage and culture that they have there if I have more time in Manitoba down the road there. But I was breaking up the drive where I was doing that, and then I was going to stay in Moose Jaw, which is west of Regina there, and I figured out that Moose Jaw is actually kind of unofficially between Calgary and Winnipeg, because it takes about, it's about a 13-hour drive, assuming you don't stop for, pee and fart breaks, gas, do some sightseeing and straighten your legs or grab some to eat. But in terms of total driving time, it's a 13-hour drive before factoring in you lose an hour when you get into Manitoba when it's daylight saving time. But it's about a 6-hour drive to get to Moose Jaw if you're going east from Calgary or west from Winnipeg there. But right downtown in Moose Jaw, I love this hotel. It was actually called the Grant Hall Hotel, and once again, it's another old historic hotel that I think I remember I stayed on the 3rd floor. Once again, it was the 3rd floor, but it was a 5-story hotel, if I remember, and I only stayed there one night, but I definitely took a lot of pictures, and I just loved this hotel because it had that old historic charm. It once again was another brick building. You greeted into this old, lobby. You get the traditional desk, big atrium-like lobby with big chandeliers. I think I remember in this hotel, actually, they had a couple more elevators, and they were a little more modern in this hotel. So, one of the reasons I like these old historic hotels is you kind of step back into time, see the old architecture, the old furniture and old features, but get the modern comforts, of HVAC, plumbing, and Wi-Fi, which is pretty much essential now when you travel here. But this Grand Hall Hotel, it had lots of antique furniture both around the hotel and in my hotel room, and I think the plumbing in the bathroom was modernized, but it just had that old historic charm. It was definitely a great overnight stay. I was stopping just to break up the drive to go back and attend a few things. It was a quick, long drive. Once again, it was a quick football trip, and then I had some other things that I had to attend to afterwards. And it wasn't my main summer holiday, it was a football trip. But and I also remember there was sections of the hotel, like it wasn't all, floor. That if you went up one floor there, I remember there was a big communal kitchen, and then outside a kitchen and games room, if I remember. It's been a couple years, and I've only been in this hotel once, so for sure, definitely staying in it again. It had an outside balcony that you can step out, and I think you can book it for a private function, but if there's no private function there, excuse me, it's open to the public. You can go out and, have a drink and just enjoy the scenery and step out and enjoy all the historic buildings that you see in Moose Jaw there. And then right behind the hotel, there was I think it's called Crescent Park. I'm not sure. There's a main park that's just outside of downtown that's a few blocks away. I walked around in the park there and enjoyed the park before calling it a night, and knowing that I had to get up and had a 6.5 hour plus drive away before I returned the car the next day. But I love the Grand Hall Hotel. I'd say the only one traveler's tip here is the only parking they have on site here is on-street parking, so you hope and pray that your car is fine overnight. But the beauty they have in Moose Jaw, and this is still a couple years ago, it could change, so don't hold my word to it, but if you have an out-of-province plate, you don't pay for parking. So by virtue of me renting a car and me in Alberta, and I had an Alberta plate on my rental car, I didn't have to pay for parking there. I think Sundays were free anyway, but I know that Moose Jaw has that feature where you don't pay for parking if you have an out-of-province plate. So if you don't have a Saskatchewan plate there, your parking's free on the street there. And Moose Jaw is definitely a nice little So they nicknamed it the Little Chicago there, and then apparently there's a legend of Al Capone there. I mean, if I had one football trip planned that didn't work out, just to make an experience, even though I read the reviews and they say it's a run-down motel, but there was an Al Capone hideaway hotel, and I would have stayed there for a night just to experience that. But that didn't work out, but I'll keep that in mind, in future trips there, because it's right near the tunnels of Moose Jaw, where there's an underground tunnel network that connects to buildings underground there, and there was a legend that Al Capone and sneaking liquor during the Prohibition there. So a lot of stories and legend there, and I guess they really keep it legendary because they say you can't take pictures or video in the tunnels of Moose Jaw there. I think it's just to preserve the secret in that, but that's my historic hotel in Moose Jaw there. The last hotel, I've stayed in this one twice, in back-to-back annual spring vacations, is actually called the Plaza Hotel in Kamloops there. And it's right in the heart of the city. You're not too far of a walk from Riverside Park there, and I also think the Riverside Hotel, I think that's they're confusing names, the Plaza Hotel, because outside Riverside Park there is the train station there, and the one company that stops by there is the Rocky Mountaineer, and there's tours that it starts in Vancouver and eventually stops in Kamloops, then goes through Banff, and then eventually here in Calgary. That this hotel is where the Rocky Mountaineer people stay in, because there's times that because both times I stayed in the Plaza Hotel in Kamloops, it was a 4-night stay. I remember the first time I was there, I was in the 3rd floor again. It always seems like that's where I go, but then this most recent time, on this past annual spring vacation here, I stayed in the 5th floor, which is the top floor. I mean, all I could say is that this hotel, I mean, it does have its charm where once again, it's an old historic building, and I think it was revitalized. Same with the Grand Hall Hotel in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, that apparently it was just left to decay, and it became, I'm going to rant about pigeons again, but it was definitely a favorite place for pigeons, and they had to clean all that up, but then eventually it became a hotel, because these buildings, at the time, they were used as like a telecommunications company, newspaper company, or whatever, back when it was originally opened almost 100 years ago. And by I mean, it's an old, brick sandstone building. But, I mean, both times when I stayed at the Plaza Hotel, I think I stayed in a basic room, because basically the room kind of had the same layout in the 3rd and 5th floor, what rooms that I stayed in. I mean, it just had a view of downtown where I was looking at. I remember when I was on the 3rd floor, I was always looking at the parking lot you stayed in. I mean, this hotel, you had to pay for parking, but for a cheap rate, it was only $8 a night there. It made it, for the location, it actually made it worth, in that case, to pay for parking. I still like to not pay for parking for hotel on top of paying for your nightly rate there, but I had a deal that it made it worth it. But yeah, I mean, I remember this hotel, it had a historic bar attached to it, and it always features nightly shows there, has its standard conference room there, big old wide staircases. This one did have a slow elevator, and this is where I mentioned that when the Rocky Mountaineer guy was checking in, there was people from the Rocky Mountaineer. I guess you get a complimentary glass of orange juice, because I saw a bunch of glasses of orange juice at this hotel, and it said, "Welcome visitors," or something like that. But there, I was stuck one time. There was a guy loading bags and taking it up there, and it was a slow elevator, and there was disclaimers talking about don't jump in the elevator, and saying why this elevator is slow, because it was still the motor from 1920 there. But I mean, all these hotels, and then right downtown Kamloops, you're right in the heart of the city there. There's a pretty good location. You have a lot of shopping districts nearby, and the cultural district there, and also very close to when I did the Yale tour, where I definitely did a lot of beer samplings and that on my last spring vacation there. I could maybe throw in a bonus historic hotel. I'm not going to say I'm a sucker for this one. I would only stay in this one if I was really, really thrifty. Was the Valmont Hotel in Valmont, which is where I love to stay in. I'm not too sure if it is an old historic hotel. I mean, it looks like an older hotel. It doesn't have the same historic charm with the sandstone and brick building here, but you definitely tell it has some age to it. But the only disadvantage of this hotel is that it's a two-story building. There's a bar and restaurant on the main floor with a liquor store, and the rooms are on the top. So of course you're overhead of the bar area there, and you know, sometimes the bar thing gets noisy there, and that could be a problem. Or also the fact that it's near a train line there, and there's freight trains that come all day and night there on the main CN line there. But and the Wi-Fi is shoddy, but you get that at any travel place. But you know, if you're being thrifty there, it might be worth the cost, but temper your expectations there. But that could kind of be a bonus hotel. And another bonus hotel, I'm not too, if I remember if it's historic or not, but one of my travels there, I actually stayed in Creston, BC, British Columbia there, where I actually stopped there, check out the community and go to the Columbia Brewing Company to see the Kokanee plant. It was called the Creston Hotel, and I actually loved that local hotel. I didn't have its big name. It was this local hotel. It was attached to a bar there and a restaurant, but I mean, you hear some noises, but it wasn't too much of a problem there. But it felt like another old historic hotel that was modernized, and you know, your standard 4 or 5 story building, and you know, just the drywall in the hallways, the standard narrow hallways with all the doors and that. But yeah, and then just how the carpet is, how you get the carpet section and then you get the wood section that before you get in the doors there. I guess you could tell I work in the engineering and planning industry. When I pick up those things, I do the electrical design part of these set buildings. But you know, when you work in the industry for over 13 years like I have, you pick up on that lingo and start thinking all that jazz. But yeah, I mean, of all the times I travel there, I mean, I do ultimately like to try to pick a hotel that, you know, if it's close to the game, if I'm going to a game out of town or particular event, I like to at least either be, you know, within walking distance or nearby a bus or a train or transit, for one. And then two, you gotta look at the area, and then, you know, obviously the price. I mean, I'm not going to spend $600 a night just because I'm a sucker for old historic hotels. I would definitely stay in, you know, standard Super 8. Or the other nice thing I look for is if I get breakfast. That's definitely a plus if you stay in a hotel and you get breakfast the next morning. If all possible, it's not always possible, and that's where I get back to, if it's close to everything, that if you can, you know, go grab something like A&W or McDonald's or whatever, even if it's 7-Eleven, you would have something to eat there. But you know, I've definitely become a sucker for old heritage hotels there, and these are my few stories and properties I stayed at. They all have its old historic charm and character there that you don't necessarily get in today's modern hotels. I've also stayed at, you know, modern hotels that you could tell they were built in the last couple of years, and they have their own unique charm that I don't know if I'll make a personal blog on it. I might eventually will, but you know, these are all my stories here, going back to the Deer Lodge and Lake Louise, Alberta, the Patricia Inn in Vancouver, East Hastings, the Grant Hall Hotel in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and then I highlight the last one with the Plaza Hotel in Kamloops, British Columbia. Then I throw in the bonus hotel, the Valmont Hotel in Valmont, British Columbia, and the Crescent Hotel in Crescent, British Columbia. But yeah, I mean, those are all my stories on how I've become a sucker for old historic hotels here. I mean, if you watched along and listen to my story here. Thank you for watching here. But what's your, stories and favorite old historic hotels? Try to make it mostly good or bad. I mean, it's all been mostly great experiences. Why I've become a sucker for, these old historic hotels for all the merry reasons I talk about, the old historic charm. But I like the old historic charm with still modern day, luxuries that we can't live without now, especially with plumbing and Wi-Fi has definitely become more critical, especially when you're always on the go and, you got to entertain yourself when you're at your room there. But anyway, if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I mean, I do these personal vlogs, and I love doing these personal vlogs because it's basically storytelling and give my feelings and thoughts about whatever the topic I have in mind here, and get in a storytelling mode and don't need the script or make too many notes ahead of time. But I mostly, do cover sports, where I cover Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, all the teams that are owned by the Flames, and do news stories, game recaps, and that, and any big news transactions. And I also share, some of my travel experiences on the go, or maybe I will try to do a Google Photos creation of these hotels that I've stayed in, and if the ones that I took pictures of that I found that I can share, that'd be worth it. But that'll be another video. So, I mean, if you enjoy what I do, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and use that bell icon to follow along. And I'll say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, and happy travels, whatever kind of hotels that you personally like to stay at.